even though a quarter of New York City speaks a language other than English and not English, and fully 50% speak a language other than English in their homes. So it was really a problem for those folks who we would go in, accompany them to an appointment. We could serve as a translator, but there was no infrastructure in place to respond to this growing population of New York City residents who needed different kinds of services to be able to equally access their government.
And they also weren't generous with their benefits. I mean, they didn't volunteer food stamps or different things like
absolutely.
that.
It's a total bureaucracy, a really discouraging, alienating, frustrating, and confusing process. It is less so, but it's still a difficult
I've always been amazed
process.
at the ability of people to navigate the system. I don't know if I would be able to. I mean, I think
it's really tough, and these are folks who often are going through some sort of crisis in their own lives that leads them to the welfare center. And instead of saying, hey, how can we help you? The assumption under Giuliani was, how can we get you out of here? And I think now it's less so, but it's certainly not the kind of welcoming, supportive atmosphere we would want.
So are there people who live in Bushwick who want to study English and can't find classes?
We have waiting lists
you do
in
have
the
waiting
hundreds
lists
for our classes. Many churches in the neighborhood face the same problem. There's been a couple great studies done by the Center for Urban Future talking about the scarcity of English classes and the massive need. The classes that do exist, by and large, exist in Manhattan, even though the majority of the people who need the classes don't live there. So it's a real problem.
It's astonishing, and it doesn't ever seem to change. Make the Road by Walking now has 45, did you say?
I think it's probably 45 staff people. We got about 25 full-time, a bunch of part-time folks.
And let's talk about it. It's basically, the organization is to make these people powerful and be able to
Absolutely,
to do what they have to do to make their lives
absolutely.
decent.
So we do a couple things. I mean, fundamentally, we exist to try and get people organized, informed about the issues in the city. But we understand that people face immediate crises, and oftentimes that can be a launching point for them to want to get involved. And so we provide an array of legal services, housing, government benefits, workplace-related, failure to pay minimum wage type of legal services. We also believe strongly that people working together is essential, but people need to have some level of confidence and capacity on their own. And so we have an after-school program where the community partners of something called the Bushwick School for Social Justice.
It's wonderful. It's a very good school.
It's a great school,
yeah. Is that another Father Powis partly?
Father Powis definitely worked with us as we tried to get the Department of Ed. And they're about to graduate something like 80% of their students. The previous high school in the neighborhood, Bushwick High School, used to graduate in the neighborhood of 3 or 4%. So it's a big improvement for young people.
But it's not enough for all the kids who need it.
Absolutely not. I mean, there's a couple problems. One, it's a great school, but at any given time, there's only however many, 400, 450 spaces, and there's thousands of kids in the neighborhood who need to go to high school. There's some other great schools in the neighborhood, but another big problem that we face is that what we see is the number of 9th grade student or 8th graders who are moving on to 9th grade is higher by several hundred than the number of 9th grade seats available in high schools in the neighborhood. So what happens is the kids who are least engaged or whose parents are least engaged end up having to take the L train out to Canarsie, take a 45-minute bus, and it just makes it that much more likely that they'll drop out, kind of get lost in the cracks.
It's another very complicated system to navigate.
Absolutely.
The whole selection of schools.
Absolutely.
So you do legal services. You do tutoring and education. You teach computer skills as well as English,
ESL, literacy, basic literacy in Spanish, and then we do a bunch of after school. We have a tutoring program that goes every day of the week.
Then you do teaching how to organize, don't you?
Yes, absolutely. It's an important thing for folks to know, both kind of the basics of how to reach out to your neighbor effectively, to who makes decisions here in New York City and New York State, and then helping people avoid some of the pitfalls of organizing, which is falling prey to internal conflicts, trying to help folks develop a larger politics that kind of transcends the me versus them. Let's get services for Bushwick, and don't worry about the folks in Corona. We really are trying to create a sensibility that what we're trying to do is see community not competitively and not geographically, but rather kind of based on class and interest.
And then you help workers, workplace justice, right?
Yes, absolutely.
And what does that mean?
Well, so many workers, hundreds of thousands of workers are not paid minimum wage in the city. So many workers are abused in the workplace. And so we created something called the Workplace Justice Project, so those folks have a place to go. One, to get the legal services they need, and two, to get support organizing to put pressure on their bosses, essentially, to obey the law, to respect their dignity, to respect their rights. And we've had some amazing gains. One 10-store sports apparel chain called Foot Co. was paying their workers between $3 and $4 an hour. None of them had health insurance. None of them, got breaks. It was a bad place to work. We started working with the workers. We helped them to decide they wanted to form a union, and then they organized themselves, and they ended up kind of voting to join the retail, wholesale, and department store union. And then we helped negotiate a contract, so now they're going to be earning over $8 an hour. All of them have health insurance, part-time, full-time. They have vacations, they have seniority, they only can be fired for cause as opposed to for whatever the boss wants. So.
And then what do we do about housing?
Housing's a big problem in the city, and we think it's kind of a two-pronged approach is necessary, and it's, I think, particularly hard in Bushwick because there's tons of gentrification. There's new lofts being built. Landlords can smell the opportunity to make money, and so oftentimes they stop fixing their apartments. They start harassing their tenants, pressuring them, threatening they're going to call immigration on them. Really terrible stuff. But what we think is we got to do half of the problem is preserving the affordable housing there is by enforcing the housing code and by making sure that the rent laws are enforced. The other piece of, and then I think what we'd like to do is see rent control and rent stabilization expanded, because right now the state levels are set so low that so many apartments are kind of moving from control to no control. So that's a big priority. And then the other priority is just building new affordable housing and trying to do it in a way so we're not talking about affordability defined as 80 plus $1,000 of income a year, but maybe by zip code, because in Bushwick the per capita income is $7,000. And so the idea that something that's affordable to someone with $80,000 is affordable to folks in Bushwick is just crazy.
Father Powis, who has been on this program,
oh really,
and is I agree with you, a most remarkable person. He tells that an owner buys a building, right, and it's run down and everything else, but they come to a tenant and they offer them $3,000 or $4,000 to move, and that's a lot of money to somebody who earns who has an income of $7,000 or no job. And they move, and then they renovate the building, and then it becomes one of your lofts.
Right.
And it's always fascinating me because it's not just, it doesn't start with the needs of low-income people. I mean, the wave starts where the housing is most expensive, pushing people to the next level, the next level, the next level, and that's what's happening in Bushwick, I think.
Absolutely. I mean, to the point where folks aren't even moving within New York City; they're moving off into Reading, Pennsylvania.
That's right.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's an incredible.
It's really, but it is really tragic because it's very dislocating, obviously, for a family, for kids, to be forced out of their community, and it's troubling when you read an article. There was an